Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Climate and Community Resilience Lessons from the Soil. This is our second event. Our first one was 2 weeks ago, and that recording is up on our YouTube page and Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition webpage if you'd like to check it out. This event is Historical Landscapes, Learning from the Past. Chief Nathan Perro and Whitney Shields will be our speakers this evening. Just to let you know, we've set up this Zoom meeting to keep your video cameras and microphones off for the first portion of this event. This is to keep technological disruptions and distractions to a minimum as best we can. And then later on, we'll change that setting and allow for group participation. We look forward to that. This entire series is being recorded, so you will have access to it later on for reference to keep you coming back. That also means that we ask that you stay mindful of the fact that you're being recorded once we get to the group discussions in the later part of this event. As I mentioned, after the presentations, there'll be a chance to turn your video cameras on. Please do that according to your comfort level. Additionally, if you'd like to change the way that your name shows up on the screen, you can do that now. If you right-click on the box of your Zoom screen that represents yourself, there should be an option to rename yourself by typing in something new. So please feel free to do that at any point if that's what you'd like to do. So we have enabled the chat function on Zoom. So if you have any questions or concerns throughout the event, please type those into the box and someone from our team will try to assist you as best we can. Please be patient with us as this is a learning process for all of us. Please also note that with the chat box, there's an option to send messages to different people. The default option is that your message will get sent to everyone on the call. So please keep that in mind when you're putting in a chat. If you want to send something to someone privately, you can choose their name from the list. If you don't do that, it will come to everyone. And this event is being recorded. We're hoping that you will all use the chat box to ask your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any point, please type that into the chat box to everyone. We ask that you start your questions with a question mark and then the person's name to who that question is addressed. If your question is for a particular person, just make that clear by putting a question mark and then their name, so that we can it'll make it a lot easier for us to figure out what are the actual questions. And we may be combining similar questions as we get into the chat portion to be efficient with time. If you attended our first event, please note that we will be doing the Q&A answer portion of today a little bit differently. Our first speaker, Chief Nathan Perro, will be answering your questions through his presentation. It's a much more interactive experience, so please submit your questions throughout his presentation so that we can answer those accordingly. After his portion, we'll turn to Whitney Shields, and Whitney will spend some time presenting with slides with time for Q&A afterwards. But again, feel free to submit those questions as they come to you. We'll gather those in the chat and organize those for the Q&A afterward. Toward the latter portion of today's event, we'll be using breakout rooms after all the speakers are over so that we can have conversation. We're going to provide some guidance on how we will do that once we get there. We think that we have figured out some of the kinks from last time, so fingers crossed that it goes a little bit more smoothly this time. With all of that information, we hope that you're settled in, that you're feeling comfortable with the technology. We're all learning to become more comfortable with this technology. Please enjoy yourselves. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I'm going to send it over to Lauren Weston, who is going to read our land acknowledgement for this event.
Thank you so much, Kat. I am very honored to be reading this land acknowledgement. It was provided to us by John and Donna Moody from the Winter Center for Indigenous Traditions. Just so everybody knows, the text of this acknowledgement is posted on the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition website. And so here we go. When Indigenous peoples of the Americas travel to other Indigenous nation homelands, It's a common courtesy since ancient times to acknowledge the indigenous nation and peoples whose homeland that we are gathering on. For the purposes of this series being broadcast and watched from the Wobetek, or the White River, on the ancient grounds of the Wobetek Odanak, the White River Village in Indakana, our land, we are gathering in the middle of this ancient nation homeland, which includes Vermont, New Hampshire, northern Massachusetts, western Maine, and southern Quebec. The Alnobak, or the people, as they are called in Alnobiwi, which is the Abenaki language, have also been called the Wabanakiak, the people of the East or Dawnland, or Abenaki since ancient times by indigenous relatives in the East and indigenous peoples from as far away as Hopi and Diné, or Navajo country, all the way to present-day Alaska and Tierra del Fuego in South America. Today, we are convening online from the sovereign homeland of the Abenaki Nation and people. Abenaki traditions speak clearly of being created here in the beginning. Though archaeologists and linguists as recently as the last 40 years have stated that the Abenaki and all of their Algonquin language group relations from California and High Plateau to the Plains, the Great Lakes, Hudson Bay, to the Maritimes, and down to Virginia, are no more than 1,500 years old, and some have recently stated that the Abenaki may be related to indigenous peoples who are documented here for 9,000 years. A date that keeps moving back, given the major Abenaki site recently documented in Keene, New Hampshire, which is dated to the mid-13,000 years before present time period. Abenaki people themselves, along with many of their cousins in the Northeast, state unequivocally that we have always been here and we will always be here. From ancient times down to 1760, the Abenaki Nation, which included numerous villages and thousands of extended families, was an independent native nation centered in their homeland, recognized by all other native nations and the British, French, Dutch, and other European colonizers. Though some parts of the homeland in the seacoast of New Hampshire and Maine, southern Vermont and New Hampshire, as well as northern Massachusetts, were shared with the encroaching English colonists from the 1630s on, most of the original homeland has never been sold or given away. In the American Revolution, George Washington, the Marquis de Lafayette, Jacob Bailey, Timothy Bedell, Moses Hazen, and many other leaders of the American resistance agreed with the Abenaki and their cousins, the Penobscot and the Passamaquoddy of Maine, that they would retain their villages and homeland in exchange for helping in the defense of the northern frontier against the British. The ancient villages of Missisquoi in northwestern Vermont and the Coasacus in the upper Connecticut River Valley were both explicitly acknowledged as Abenaki villages of long standing, which would remain in Abenaki hands in perpetuity. The Penobscot and the Passamaquoddy nations retained 3 villages in Maine after the Revolution, after a tremendous 30-year struggle down to 1800. In Abenaki country, the word of the new American colonists was not kept. So the Abenaki Nation was largely driven underground in the 1760 to 1800 period. The people have remained in every town and watershed in the homeland right down to the present day. In the 1970s, the Abenaki Nation of Missisquoi and the Coasec Abenaki of the Coasec Traditional Band of the Sovereign Abenaki Nation stood up in the northwestern Vermont and the upper Connecticut River Valley. They formed the Abenaki Nation Coalition with many Abenaki extended families and communities to protect and care for the people and the homeland, as well as to facilitate the protection of Abenaki burial grounds and sacred sites, and to return Abenaki burials, grave goods, and sacred items back home for reburial. In 2008, the Bureau of Indian Affairs Federal Acknowledgement Project rejected the Abenaki Nation of Missisquoi petition for federal recognition with extensive involvement of the Vermont Attorney General's office. In 2011 and 2012, the Vermont legislature acknowledged 4 Abenaki communities, including the Abenaki Nation of Missisquoi, the Elnu tribe, the Nulhegan tribe, and the Coasec Band of the Cause. The original Coasec traditional band of the sovereign Abenaki Nation, which is still based in Thetford, Vermont, was blocked from being acknowledged by the Vermont legislature in 2016 and 3 of the 4 new tribes. Chief Nathan Pirro of this group will be our speaker today. In addition, the Abenaki Nation of New Hampshire and the Coasec Band of the Pennacook Abenaki people are long-term Abenaki groups, which are also not state or federally recognized. There are hundreds of Abenaki extended families in this area, and the wider nation homeland and beyond that are still here. In Canada, there are 2 Abenaki Nation communities at Odanak and Wollanack, which are both federally recognized in Canada as First Nations. We want to acknowledge the ancient Abenaki people and nation. We are aware that countless newcomer families in this area and the wider region were given indigenous seeds and plants, shown the ways of Zogalakon, which is maple sugaring, introduced to many crucial technologies and ways of living, from canoe, toboggan, snowshoe, and basket making, to ways of farming, fishing, trapping, and living, along with caring for the land, waters, and air in a good way, which are still widely practiced in the Abenaki homeland. We hope that we will learn to better care for the land and waters here in partnership with the many Abenaki Nation peoples in a respectful way. With that, send it back over to Kat.
Thank you, Lauren. And thank you to John and Donna Moody for that beautiful language and acknowledgement, which is a very critical thing that we need to do, all of us, to acknowledge the land that we're on and all of our inhabitants. Just a little reminder to anyone who's just joined us. Please use the chat box if you have any questions throughout this event, including any technical questions about how to make your screen work. We will be able to help you as best that we can. There are a ton of resources on the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition website, which is just vermonthealthysoilscoalition.org, that you can explore. And the recording of Event 1 is also posted there. Please, if you have participated in Event 1 or if you watch the recording, we ask that you take a few minutes to fill out the survey posted alongside the recording on the website. We're also posting links to the surveys for Event 1 and this current event, Event 2, in the chat box for now for you to fill out later. Your feedback will be used to improve this and future events. We want to make sure that we're bringing you good content in a way that is able to be received. Your feedback is really important to us. This will also help us to continue to secure funding to continue to host events like these in the future. We have a survey made up for each event, so please fill out each one for each event as you are able to. This series has been brought to you by a collaborative group of organizations that we pulled together in the fall of last year. We've been working all winter, working together to figure out how we can combine our talents and connections and skills and stories to bring you a series that we feel is really important. Then the pandemic hit, and so now we've gone online. And it's been quite a lot of work for all of these organizations. Extend your thanks to each one of these organizational partners: Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition, Co-op Food Stores, the Hanover Food Co-op, Upper Valley Food Co-op, Vital Communities, Bale, which is building a local economy in Royalton, and Grow More, Waste Less, and Extinction Rebellion Upper Valley. Thank you all so much for working with us. We look forward to doing so much more with you in the future. In addition to our organizational partners who did all of the work to make this happen, we have quite a collection and growing of really generous financial donor sponsors that have helped us to bring this series to you. So also please thank them with your business and your kind words, and tell everyone you know how great they are. And they're all up here on the screen for you to see. They're also listed on our Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition website, and we're tagging them as often as we can in all of our promotions to make sure that we are thanking everybody for their generosity. It really does take a village, and in these times, we're really finding that that's true. And so we're super grateful to have this village behind us. In addition to these sponsors, there's one sponsor in particular that really went above and beyond here. Chelsea Green is offering a 35% off discount for all online orders that are gotten through this series, whether you're attending live or you're watching. At some point that will probably be cut off. That discount code is BALE35, BALE 35. So any online orders that you purchase through Chelsea Green, make sure you put in that code so you get a 35% discount on all their books. And in case you don't know, Chelsea Green has been the publisher of so many important books, and they continue to be right on the front line of really good information. So give them your sponsorship. They've also provided us with a list of books that are recommended for each event based on our series title. So the books for this event are Wetland, Woodland, Wildland by Elizabeth Thompson, Eric Sorensen, and Robert Zano. Farming for the Long Haul by Michael Foley. Farming on the Wild Side by Nancy and John Hayden. The Resilient Farm and Homestead by Ben Falk. So those are the 4 that were recommended, but you can choose any books that you want from Chelsea Green online with that discount code and get 35% off. Another thing that you need to know about Chelsea Green is that anyone who takes our survey will be entered into a raffle at the end of our series to win Chelsea Green books. So please fill out our surveys. And if you fill out 6 surveys because you went to 6 events, that increases your chances of winning in the raffle. So please attend our events. Please watch them all, share them with your friends, and have everybody fill out a survey to be a winner in that last event. So in addition to supporting all of our organizing sponsors and our financial sponsors, we would love your support to keep this series going and making sure that we can pay all of the people doing the work and all of our speakers that are donating their time and the people who have donated so much important content to make this series happen effectively and efficiently. You can go on to the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition website and you can donate. You'll see the big red arrow there showing you where the donate button is on our website right underneath all of our sponsors. So please, if you can, please go there and make a donation to our series. We really, really appreciate it. And we're so glad that you're here with us. We are really close to being done with our opening. There's a lot of information we want to make sure that you know about, including that this is part 2 of a series of 6 events. Up on your screen now is our poster and all of our event dates. These were originally intended to be in person and much longer, but we've modified them to be online webinars. They're all free to attend. We want to get this information out to as many people as possible. So please mark your calendars and try to attend them live in our webinar format so that you can be a part of the important community discussions, which are a really critical piece of this work. Okay. We hope that you will join us for all of these series. We're really excited about it. We hope you are too. There's a lot of good stuff that we can work together on to create and shape the world that we want together. Much of our series is based on the foundation of looking at the world through the lens of soil. And there are soil health principles that we really like to promote as a means of understanding how it is that we can interface with our land as humans. How can we manage land in a way that is based on principles that is thinking in wholes, that is thinking in whole systems, so that we're thinking about not just only humans, but all of the other beings on this planet, the leafed ones and the winged ones and the legged ones, and everything teeny tiny to everything really big. And when we think about soil health principles as opposed to practices, that helps to get us there. And that's what we like to promote. So I hope that you'll embrace these soil health principles. These were designed by the Natural Resources Conservation Service, an amazing set of people that really work to try and help farmers and land managers create healthy ecosystem function in their landscapes. So on the left side of your screen right now, you're looking at those soil health principles. The top 4 were designed by the NRCS that I just mentioned. Number 5, animal contact with soil, or also otherwise known as integrate animals, was coined by one of my heroes, Gabe Brown, who is a rancher in North Dakota. I highly recommend checking out his book, Dirt to Soil, narrated by him if you get the audio version. Excellent book. And the 6th one, Slow and Sink Water, makes sense. And if you follow all 5, you get there. But we feel like it's so important to think about the way that we manage water, that we include it in our soil health principles. And on the right side of the screen, you have your soil health principles. And these are just a little something that I designed mostly for myself, but I find that people like to share them as well. And so I would invite you to think about the soil health principles in terms of whole systems, ecosystem function, and connection to all beings, and develop your own soil health principles that are, or soil health principles that are in line with those soil health principles. When we think about things through principles, we're able to listen in a broader way and not get so trapped into practices. And I hope that makes sense to you. You can find the soil and soil health principles up on the Vermont Healthy Soil Coalition website. We invite you to use them as much as you'd like, and please also create your own soil health principles. I'm going to turn it over now to Lauren Weston.
Thanks, Kat. So just a couple more things here. We hope that you will learn something new and have your curiosity and imagination sparked. We hope that you will make a new friend, learn about a new organization, or have your world completely turned on its head. We hope that you will take initiative, try something new, and figure out ways around barriers. And we hope that you will strengthen relationships and deepen understandings that you are bringing with you today. So for this webinar, please do whatever you need to do to feel comfortable. These events are for you. So if you need to leave early, step away for a phone call or a crying child, or if you need to take some space to digest information, please do so. The goal of these events is to realize the knowledge and resources available within the community of the Upper Valley, and to use that to build a just future. There will be presenters providing some content and new ideas, but everyone on this webinar and beyond is a critical part of this community. We are trying to work against the typical expert audience dynamic, often experienced at events like these, because we all have something to contribute that someone else needs. We are all dependent on each other and the Earth's systems. So, as Kat mentioned before, we are working towards thinking about connections and relationships, working in whole systems. Though critically important, we do not want to get started on the parts of the elephant in the room. We want to bring these issues into context to deepen our understanding and find new solutions. We want to ask different questions that reflect thinking in whole systems. Often when we ask questions, we don't think about wholes. For example, rather than ask about specifics, we can listen to the natural systems all around us to broaden our thinking and open ourselves up to asking better questions that are focused on actual potential answers and reveal even better questions for next time. To help us create a safe and enjoyable online environment, there are some things we would like to explicitly acknowledge so that we can have productive conversations. We would like your input on this list as well. So if you have anything to add or any critiques, please post those in the chats and we will make changes for next time. A few of these things are that the world is changing in lots of ways constantly, as I'm sure you all know. We also want to acknowledge that oppression exists, that everything has the right to live and everyone deserves to be heard. We want to acknowledge that we are all bringing with us our working models of the world, and we want to say that we are all open to adjusting those models. We also all speak from our own lived experiences and worldviews, so just to keep that in mind at every point during this webinar and beyond. We also want to acknowledge that we are all willing to learn, as I hope you all are. And if you have anything that you would like us to add to those agreements, please send those our way. And now we are going to watch a quick video that Kat Buxton made.
This flower and bread video was designed by Dee Dee Pursehouse and a high school teacher at Hartford High School, a biology teacher. so that they could begin to convey some of these really big concepts about ecosystem function and landscape function to students. We're looking at two landscapes here. On the red plate, this is a degraded landscape. It's flower as a stand-in for a degraded landscape, which is dirt, sand, silt, and clay, broken up rocks. On the green plate is bread, and it's a stand-in for a healthy landscape. It's sand, silt, clay, and biology. Super important. Let's see what happens when we rain on these landscapes. Pouring water into a rain cloud, of course, and the rain cloud is causing erosion. The rain is causing erosion. We see some runoff. There appears to be flooding. The color of that water indicates that the soil itself, or the landscape, is now a part of the water system. We have dry places all over the landscape, but yet there's flooding. This seems to be flooding and drought at the same time. If we were a plant in this landscape and there was a drought and places did not get water, it would be dry at the bottom. So let's see. We find a totally dry plate on the bottom. So if we're a plant in this landscape, our roots would not have just gotten a drink. We would be thirsty. Flooding, drought in the same place, poor water quality. If you were farming or gardening in this landscape or adding any type of household chemicals to this landscape, those would now be in the waterway. Let's see what happens when we rain on a healthy landscape. On the bread. The water is infiltrating into the sponge of the soil. It's soaking in like a sponge. Those pore spaces that hold the bread out are happening because yeast is the magic ingredient in bread, which is the biology in bread. That's what makes air spaces those organisms breathe. Those pores are held together in landscapes by the goose glues, snots, and slimes that are produced by biological soil organisms that live all throughout the soil landscape. Let's see what happens when we rain twice as much on this landscape, since we didn't see any flooding from the first rainstorm. These pore spaces make up about half of the space of soil, and they are where the air is in soil. It's where water can infiltrate into soil, and that air and water, along with photosynthesis and the sugars made by plants, sustain microbial life in the soil. So twice the amount of water, and we still have no flooding in this landscape. I'm going to pour a little more because I'm really trying to reach saturation here. Saturation will happen when we start to see water flow out from the bottom of this landscape, indicating that the water is going through the soil to the base layer. Soil is a filter, healthy soil. Biological organisms and chemical interactions with those organisms in the soil, in these pore spaces, in the sponge, actually clean water. If you had to live in these landscapes, would you choose the flour or the bread if you were a farmer? If you were growing plants of any kind, you would likely choose the bread. The bread is wet all the way through. We have full saturation. If these landscapes were out in hot, hot, sunny conditions for days after this rainstorm, this one would evaporate and get covered with a hard, crusty surface, would not take in water the next time it rained. This one would get a little stale on the outside, so to speak, because it's bread, and down in the middle you would still have some moisture, so organisms and plants in this landscape would still be able to get a drink. If you had to build a house in one of these landscapes, you would likely choose the bread. Your house here might be in the waterway. If you had to get water from natural sources in one of these landscapes, you would likely choose the bread because you might be able to find it after it rained and you would want to drink it, as opposed to this right after a rainstorm. Thanks everybody for hanging in through our full opening, and that was the Flour and Bread video, which we like to show at all of our events because it really helps to frame the context of landscapes and human management on landscapes and the resulting effect. We're now going to turn to the primary focus of our event today. With that, we're going to turn to Chief Nathan Perro of the Quessack traditional band of the sovereign Abenaki Nation. Chief Perro was born into the tribe in 1949 and has lived and learned about his heritage in the Upper Valley all of his life, except for 7.5 years in the Air Force, being deployed to Europe and Southeast Asia and to many stateside bases. Nathan Perro has been the Sagmo chief since 2011. He loves to go to schools, events, and meetings to tell the other side of the story. He grew up on a small dairy and vegetable farm in Thetford, Vermont. His family grew up outside. We are honored that he has agreed to speak with us today. We have a few questions prepared for him, but please, while Nathan is speaking, please submit questions that you would like to ask Chief Perro as well, and we'll prioritize those as you put them into the chat. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and we will be grouping those questions so that we can be more efficient with our time. And so with that, Chief Perro, I would love to turn it over to you to share with us your knowledge.
Quite. I'm very pleased to be here. What I'd like to do is take you back into history. The books are being rewritten at all times. The latest books come out through, and the scholars tell us that we my ancestors walked in from Asia 13 to 14,000 years ago. They have unearthed campfire sites down in Virginia and North Carolina that are 35 and 40,000 years old. So was the saber-toothed tiger cooking up a mastodon, or, so what we know about history is always changing. And many of us believe that our ancestors, when it started to get real cold and snow started to accumulate, we went south and stayed down in the lower part of the United States, what is now the United States. And after the ice started to recede, and there is many songs about fields of gravel and stone that are sung by our tribe and by many of the other tribes around the United States. So we all know that as the ice receded, the plants had to regrow, and then the animals had to start coming in, and then we started following the animals back north again. Many of the people that came back north, some went up the Hudson Valley River, and others kept coming northward, and then they come up the Connecticut River Valley to find a big debris dam that was located right around Middletown, Connecticut. The experts are telling us that this is called Lake Hitchcock, and it flooded from Middletown, Connecticut to St. Johnsbury, Vermont. That's about 320 miles. That was a very big lake. So the ancestors were able to get onto this lake and come up and down the different valleys in Vermont and New Hampshire. As that debris dam started to erode and the water started to recede, it got lower and lower and lower, and it down to where it is at the present day. If you drive up and down Route 5 or Route 10 in New Hampshire, you will notice that the fields on both sides of the river are very basically the same level. it was lake bottom. That stopped all the nutrients from floating downstream. So we ended up with the gravel banks on the sides of the rivers, and being very fertile, my ancestors were able to plant our crops. One of the major plantings that we did was called the Three Sisters. And this is corn, soy, bean, and pumpkin or squash. And this is made, the children did most of the digging, and you take an antler, a deer antler, and disturb the ground and get it broken up, and then dig it out with your hands, or a piece of flat wooden bark or something solid, maybe an antler off a moose. This time, the springtime of the year, we have the trout that run to spawn. And also at the same time, we have the suckers, the American carp that migrate with the trout. And both were caught in different fishing traps or by a spear. And for those of you that have ever tried to eat a carp will understand that the carp, if you had your druthers between a carp or a trout, you'd eat the trout. The carp was used for fertilizer. So the dirt was dug out, the fish and the fish remains were put onto the bottom, and the mound of dirt was put back up. The following week, the planting of the corn, we would say the prayers to the four winds to have a good growing season, to have enough water and enough sunlight and the warmth from the warm winds from the south. These were planted in the north, the south, the east, and the west on this mound that was about 2 foot in diameter. Sometimes they were up to 3 foot, depending upon how much the children wanted to work and make the mound. Then the week later, beans were planted in the northeast and northwest and southeast, southwest part of the hill. The following week, we would plant 3 kernels of squash or pumpkin. And the way this would work was that the corn would grow, the bean would grow and climb the corn stalks, and the squash and pumpkin with their big leaves would keep the moisture in the soil. The other responsibility of the children was to carry water when it was needed to these different mounds for these plants to grow. This was such an important food staple for us. Come the fall or into the winter times, you could take a squash or a pumpkin, stand it, and then see how it would stand upright, and then you cut the top off, and then take out the seeds. Some were baked and eaten, others were kept for seed for planting the following year. Then the dried corn and the dried beans were put in some water, and then cooking stone. These are the round river stone that have been washed, and they're nice and round, and they're hard and very solid. And they were kept up on a platform right by the fire. You didn't put them into the fire because when they would heat up, they would explode. So these stones were placed up on top of the ring of the fire, and one of these stones was placed into that squash or the pumpkin. And then the remainder was filled up with water, and then the cap was put back on, and then it was left for 5, 6, 7 hours. And the top was removed, the cooking stone was taken out, and we'd eat everything on the inside. The mixture of the squash and corn and the beans. So that was the first slow cooker. Slow cooker is an old invention. So this, as you see all these different flat areas where the fields were all fertile, all that soil had come down out of the brooks and down off the top of the hill. And when they would look at people, they would say, well, they're hill farmers. Well, they were the poorest people, and they were left with the poorest of the land because the rich people was able to take over the good fertile lands that were down in the valleys. But one of the little critters that a lot of people call them nuisance is the beaver. And the beaver's job was to stop water from running. And when he stopped the water, he created a little pond. And the pond kept filtering out the sediments. It gave a place for all these nutrients to settle. In every place around the upper valley, and probably else places in the United States, we have roads that are called Beaver Meadow. And this was where there was a large beaver dam, a long time ago, and it had, well, silted in, I guess what you'd call it. And when that dam finally got filled in, then it was a great place to grow, and it's full of nutrients. And you will always see that things grow. The beaver not only did it give a place for the sediments to stop, but it gave great places for fish and amphibians and mammals to sustain themselves throughout the winter. So when the French came here, they were trappers. They wanted the furs. And you'll hear and read in different stories and history books about what they call a blanket beaver. Beavers continue to grow their entire life. And when you leave the beavers alone, they would get up to 200, 250 pounds. And then when you do harvest one and you dressed it out, that pelt, you could wrap yourself in it. And if you've never felt a beaver, it is the softest fur and warmth that there is amongst all the furs. So the beaver was hunted and trapped, and it was almost extinct. Man was able to bring it back. And till today, where many people still classify him as a nuisance. But the beaver is there for a reason. Every animal on this planet, the Creator made for a reason. And we've all lived in harmony until here in the last few years, a few hundred years, where man is trying to control everything. And Mother Nature says, no, you can't control me. You can build your dams or your levees or whatever, and I'm going to give you a flood, and I'll show you that you don't know what you're doing. So man is still continuing to try to change this planet, and Mother Nature's not going to stand for it. But we all live in harmony. We're supposed to anyways. So as time has gone on and we have lived here in the valley, I want to touch a little bit about the eugenics project that was here in the state of Vermont. A lot of people think that this had never really happened. But in the 1900s, early 1900s, the state of Vermont passed a law wanting the entire state to be white. So Dr. Perkins from the University of Vermont came up with this program about experimenting, sterilizing. They would trump up charges on families and come in and remove the children from the families and put the children throughout the state so that they would never know their heritage or be able to learn from their grandparents and parents. So this was, Virgins was one of them in Waterbury, and they did experiments on the natives. And if you go to the University of Vermont, they have on display a letter from Adolf Hitler asking Dr. Perkins for permission to use that project on his unwanted. We have condemned Hitler for everything that he did for the millions of people that he had exterminated. But it was done right here in the state of Vermont. And it continued to be an active program until 1988. That's just a short time ago. And when I was 9 years old, my dad, who was chief of the tribe at that time, called everybody together and said, and he made out, and usually when we have a big gathering, the adults did the talking and stuff, and us kids went off and played somewhere. Well, Dad made it very special that all the children sat right down up front. And he told us, you cannot say that you're Native. You can't be an Indian, or bad things are going to happen to you. Well, being that young, you really don't understand what bad things are until I turned to be a teenager. And I found that the two of my cousins had been sterilized, never to have children. That was the end of their family, the end of their line. So this made it so that when we were going through school, you couldn't say who you were. You could not go back and say that that textbook was wrong. So we just had to, well, as they say, grin and bear it. And this has gone on, and my youngest son was born in 1988. And so, yeah, that was a bad time in our life. And we've all come out of it. And now the governor said that we are here. And so now we're out speaking about it. And I guess I'm one of the biggest mouths in the area because I like to go and try to tell the other side of the story, as Paul Harvey would say it. So we've still practiced the things of living off the land. In the opening slide, it said, how do we kill weeds? The best way to kill weeds. Well, most of those weeds that you're out there killing are medicine plants. The medicines that we have found that we can use. And a lot of the things that are on the lawn that you don't like the looks of could save your life or make it that pain be a lot less. And I am learning every day more things. I thought I knew a lot, but I don't know nothing. I'm still learning. And I guess I'll learn for another few years. So think about killing that weed. There's many of them that have getting ready to grow, and they're good eating. So, and that little dandelion weed everybody talks about is such a bad thing to be seeing. Well, that was brought here by the Italians so they could have their dandelion wine, and that little invasive species has now gone completely across North America. But it's a great food, a great medicine. The roots on it is a great medicine. So, yeah, they're not weeds. So, if you don't need to kill it, eat it, or find out what kind of medicine it can be used for.
Nathan, this is Kat. We do have some questions in the chat. Do you want to answer some questions?
Yes, that'd be good.
Okay, I'm going to introduce to everybody Anna, who is from Vital Communities, and she's been managing our chat. Vital Communities is one of our major organizing partners, and we're so grateful for them. Anna, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so that you can talk with Chief Perro.
All right, thank you, Kat. So yeah, we have a few questions from the audience. The first question that we have for you is, what knowledge do your people have of surviving epidemics? What knowledge do your people have that would help people survive the current pandemic? And that's a question from Bill.
Oh, how to survive this thing that's going around now. I think what we're doing is just staying apart is one of the best things. I don't know. I'm nervous a little bit about it, but if we all got real nervous, everything would just shut down and go away. But the storage of the hoarding of food is one of the biggest things that I don't quite understand. If everybody had been doing this along, we would have enough stuff in our pantry or our little supply hole. And I think that you will find that a lot of people are going to start putting in more gardens, and we'll be processing more food for winter storage or into the following year. So I just wish everybody the best and the best for their health. Next question.
Okay, apparently I didn't unmute Anna. Give me a moment.
All right, I'm back. Thank you. Is from Lauren. What is the current state of the recognition of your tribe?
That's a good question. Some of them would like to go for state recognition again. Some of us are not. If the majority of the tribe told me to go for state recognition again, I will do it because that's what's been asked of me. We had a Abenaki conference here in the state of Vermont 4 years ago, and we had delegations from the Wampanoag, the Massachusetts, plus all of the 5 nations that make up the Abenaki Nation, Abenaki conference, yeah. Anyways, so we had met with a delegation from the Iroquois Confederacy, and they're made up of 5 different nations. So they asked us if we would like to sign on with them about going to the federal government and asking for sustainable and hunting rights, which means when the president finally signs this, this will give us the right to collect enough meat and fish that would put us through the winter. And we only take what we need. The thing with the state of Vermont, the laws say that we can only have 5 fish in our presence, and we can have a total of 15 in the freezer. And if you get a family of 5, at 15 fish, not going to make you very far. So there's pros and cons to both of it, but it all depends upon what the members of the tribe wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Perro. I think Anna has a couple more questions for you, and I want to remind folks to go ahead and add questions to the chat. We have a few more minutes here with Chief Perro.
All right, next question. And you kind of answered this one already. The question was, could you speak towards the eugenics movement in Vermont and the impacts that has had and is still having on the Abenaki communities?
Yeah, that would be sort of like the part of being the Eugenics project. Most of us, I think in my generation, in my family, there was 2 that went to college. In the next generation, I think there's 5 that have gone on through the higher learning. So we are still tradespeople. And we're proud of what we've done and what we can do. So we're slowly getting there.
Great. I have another question for you. Can you tell us what climate changes you have seen in the Upper Valley during your lifetime?
Oh, we don't get the snow like we had when I was young. We had to shovel that. And today they got plows to move it all out of the way. But back then, no, we got some snow. The biggest thing that I see that is happening and changing, we're losing the butternut tree. And that was quite a staple to a lot of us. But that tree is slowly going away. And I've tried planting some butternuts to get some younger ones to start growing. And they don't take, they'll get to be 3 foot high and then they die. So I don't know what is going on, you know, something's changing, so. But I think the weathers are milder. I can give you the example of my grandfather. He logged, his sugar house was located on the Colby-Sawyer Road out of Thetford Center, off of Sawney Bean Road. On the side of Gramps' storage tank, he wrote the dates and how much syrup he made and what the grade of the syrup was. Through the 1920s and 30s and 40s, Gramp was sugaring in March and April, and sometimes into the first part of May. Now we're doing it in February and March. So, and each year it seems like it gets earlier and earlier as far as being able to tap trees and start collecting sap for syrup production.
Right. All right, so the next question we have for you is, do you know what's going on with the Wampanoag tribe in Massachusetts?
Oh, the Wampanoag. They, for those of you that don't know the true story of Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag were the first ones to have contact with the Pilgrims of 1620. And it was not a feast. The Pilgrims had come across the cache of the Wampanoag, their corn. The cache was part of their winter supply. And when they went to find it, all their food was gone. And you just don't go to the local supermarket and pick up corn. I mean, that was their food. That was for them, so they wouldn't starve through the winter. And so the Pilgrims took it. And their first meeting was not very delightful. So, but that part is, oh, I could talk for a couple hours on that whole subject. So I'll just move on to what's happening today. The Wampanoag was given federal recognition, and they had some land that was given to them to be part of their tribal. The US government has taken it back. So what's new? Every treaty that the United States government has done with any tribe across the United States goes, oh, geez, we found gold on your property. Oh, well, you guys got to move. Oh, no, we found silver there, so you guys got to move. So this is a very common practice in the US government. So the Wampanoag, oh, all we can do is help them as much as we can and stand beside them. The good story about the Wampanoag is 8 years ago, a lady wanted to get their language back. And she tried to find books or how this language was. And they're part of the Algonquin speaking nations like those up and down the East Coast. But they found a Bible from the Jesuits that were here. And the Bible was written in Wampanoag. So instead of trying to teach the natives English and then teach them the Bible, they just translated the Bible into Wampanoag. And through that Bible, this lady was able to get their language back. And when I say by getting their language back, it is the same here as being in English people. You can take somebody out of South Boston and take them into North Carolina. And even though they're both speaking American, they don't understand each other. The dialogues are different. So each one of us, we have the same word, but we may say it just a little different. So to this lady, hats off, did a good job.
Great, and Lauren included a link in the chat box that connects to more information about the tribe, and it also has a link to a petition that you can sign to support them.
Yes.
And the last question that we have, unless there's more people just typing right now, is do you have ideas about how humans could coexist with beavers in a way that lets beavers be beavers and continue their good work as water managers?
I'm going to ask you to say that one more time, please.
Sure. Any ideas about how humans can coexist with beavers? So they...
Oh, yes. Oh, there's been a system out, and the people don't like the beavers because they keep damming up culverts or different little waterways where they don't want them, or maybe flooding back onto the field. And so they've come out with this, it's a flexible culvert that they put inside of a big cage, and they sink that cage out in the middle or out into the beaver pond. And then this flexible culvert, they move a little bit of the dam out of the way, put the culvert in, and then they put the sticks back on top of it. So when the water gets that natural flow, it flows out, and the beavers can build all they wish, but it's not going to raise their water level any. So the beaver continues to exist, and then the farms the property will stop from being flooded. So there are ways that we can live with each other. And that's all we have to do is just live with each other.
Thank you for
Chief
you,
Carol,
from the audience.
sorry, Anna, did you have another question for Chief Carol?
No, that was the last question.
Great, I do have a couple more. This is Kat Buxton speaking. Chief, we have a few more minutes left. If you'll entertain us with a couple more questions, that would be great. One question I have is, what is your hope for the future of the Abenaki community in the Upper Valley?
Oh, we're here. They tried to neutralize us. We're here. We're growing. More and more people are. I don't want to say this. There's still a lot of families here in the area that have not stepped forward to say who they are, to say that they're Abenaki. So, when I step forward and open my mouth about who we were, my older cousins come down hard on me and said, don't you understand what the government has done to us? We don't trust the government. So I hope from what I've done is going to be able to bring our family forward. We're all coming back together to learn. And the thing of it's, this eugenics project, in order to save the children and their grandchildren, the grandparents never told any of the stories or said who they were. So there's a lot of people out here that don't know that they have native blood. So as we all start to realize who we are and we're starting to come together, the soup for the stew is getting more flavor. We're bringing, everybody that comes in brings something else to add. So we're going to continue to grow. And with us, our bloodline started to dilute way back in the 1600s. So if you get one drop of blood in you and you want to walk the red road and try to save this planet, please come join us.
Thank you, Chief Perro. I think I'd like to also ask you, so you and I went for a wonderful walk today through your old neighborhood and my current neighborhood, and we had a lot of great conversations, and you shared some beautiful stories. And one of the things I was really intrigued about was to hear the way that you talked about women in the Abenaki community. And could you briefly just give us all a better understanding of the roles of people in the Abenaki community?
Oh, yes. Ladies, you're going to love this, but the gentlemen, I know you're not going to, but it's the way it is. So our village was run by the ladies. The village belonged to the ladies. Man was just a guest. He was the carpenter, the hunter, and the protector. That was his job. The ladies took care of everything else in the village. When a young man had an eye on a young lady, a maiden, he would go to the house and sit outside the wigwam and sing his song, play his drums, play his flute. He'd leave different gifts outside the door for the young maiden. And if she chose him to be her mate, then there was a wedding, and the men would build them a wigwam, a place to stay. The things that were not tolerated in the village was child abuse or spousal abuse. And if you come home from a hunting trip or a scouting trip and you found all your stuff in a basket outside the door, that meant you go home to mama. Don't have to worry about any rumors in the village because everybody saw your stuff set in that basket outside the door. So if your mother was in that village, fine, you stayed, but you went home to mama. But if your mama's in another village, off you went. And there was no ifs and buts about it. So when the French came here, they said, we want to talk to your leaders. And the men said, fine, go talk to the ladies. And the French said, oh no, we don't talk to the women. A dog has more status and more rights than a woman does in France. And we said, well, the ladies are in charge of the village. So if you need to talk to them. Well, the French wouldn't talk to the ladies. So they'd talk to the men. The men would go talk to the ladies. The ladies would hold council. Then they'd come back to us. And then we'd go back and talk to the French and tell them. And it was just a story going back and forth, back and forth. And so, as I say, the village was run by the ladies, and it was run well. And that's why when the grandma spoke, it was taken care of. The discipline in the village was all done by whoever saw you do what you did wrong, you got corrected. And then you were sent home to mama. So then get corrected again. Been in there. So the ladies, yeah, the village belonged to them. And I'd love to see it go back to that way. So, ladies, you got to step up. We need somebody down in Washington, D.C. that know what they're going to do.
Thank you so much, Chief Pero, for being with us today and talking with us. I want to invite everyone to stick around for a long time. We have our next presenter coming up, and then we're going to get into some group discussions where we'll have more time to talk to Chief Pero as well. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Weston now.
Hi there. My name is Whitney Shields. I am from the Center for Agriculture and Food Systems at Vermont Law School. First of all, a big thank you to Chief Nathan Pero. Also, a big thank you to the organizers of this event who have been so resilient and adaptable during this chaotic time. So Lauren is going to put on the PowerPoint that I put together. Great. So we are going to shift gears and discuss how a community can include food access in municipal plans and update zoning codes to increase food security. This is an important topic because many municipalities have prohibited people from growing their own food on their property, citing public health concerns. However, in the past 10 years, we have seen municipalities across the United States begin to include language in their municipal plans around food access, as well as amend or update their zoning codes to improve people's access to healthy foods. Next slide. Great. So that's me. I'm Whitney Shields. I am the Postgraduate Clinical Teaching Fellow. I am also the Vermont Legal Food Hub Program Coordinator. Next slide. Great. During this presentation, I will discuss the following items: review planning and zoning and its historical impact on marginalized communities, share what municipalities are doing to improve food access, opportunities in Vermont, and the conclusion. My goals for this presentation are to provide comprehensive information about municipal authority with a specific focus on zoning and planning, share national and local examples to encourage methods of implementing similar plans in your community if you haven't already, and look at another way to strengthen our local food system through law and policy. Next slide. So to begin with, I would like to do a quick overview of the authority given to municipalities. So municipalities may pass laws and regulations when they are authorized by the state government to do so. In fact, local governments often pass more stringent requirements than state law. Zoning and land use law are primarily state and local matters. However, federal law can limit state and local government land use regulations in some instances. And here are some just key terms to quickly review for the purposes of this presentation. Municipality, a city or town with corporate status and its own government. Statute, a law enacted by a legislative body. Ordinance, legislation enacted by a municipal authority. Regulation, how laws are implemented. Agencies develop, implement, and enforce regulations. Preemption, a situation where a law enacted by a higher authority, like the state, takes precedence over a law enacted by a local or a lower authority, which would be like a municipality. Next slide. So a municipal plan or comprehensive plan is developed by a planning committee to conceptualize long-term goals for the future development of their community. Municipal plans provides research, community input, land use recommendation, analysis, etc. The Planning Commission is responsible for preparing, updating, and distributing the plan. They will hold public hearings on the plan and submit it to the legislative body for consideration. And this image is from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and I think it really helps visualize how municipal plans are put in place step by step. So step 1 is community assessment. Step 2, develop a shared community vision. Step 3, identify community goals and objectives. Step 4, map out the future. Step 5, identify priority action items, implementation, and review. Next slide. Zoning can implement a municipal plan through regulatory schemes. Most zoning takes place at the city or town level, but county or regional laws may also regulate some of the same uses. Historically, zoning has been focused on separating uses of land that were deemed incompatible, such as urban land use from agricultural use. So if you see here, here is a list of different zoning districts and their allowed uses. Residential zoning allows predominantly housing. Industrial zoning allows industry and factories. Commercial zoning allows retail, wholesale, and financial businesses. Agricultural zoning is usually found outside of cities and allows large-scale crops and animals and livestock. Open space zoning, areas protected from development. Special zoning, such as power plants and stadiums. And then mixed-use zoning, and this allows uses that would usually be confined to separate zones, often includes mixed residential commercial uses, like what you see in downtown White River Junction. So to simplify it, planning serves as a foundation for zoning, and zoning is a method of implementing planning. Next slide, please. In regard to agriculture use, rural localities may worry that zoning may restrict agricultural productivity and reject zoning altogether. Urban areas are now more often being planned with mixed use zoning in order to integrate commercial, residential, institutional, and agricultural uses. Unfortunately, zoning codes frequently restrict or prohibit agricultural activities, especially in residentially zoned areas, which decreases people's autonomy to grow their own food. Next slide. Historical local land use planning and zoning has created issues in the areas of environmental justice and food access. On the environmental end, for many years, federal policies reinforced local practices that limited housing for African Americans to less desirable areas adjacent to factories. Federally insured mortgages provided by the Federal Housing Authority shaped exclusionary practices by subsidizing the suburbs, thus proliferating race-based housing policies that continued well into the 1960s, and some would argue even today. Federal highway projects, as well as urban renewal policies, have often displaced and segregated African Americans into limited areas. And I have the image as an example of that. So this is 2 photos of Hastings Street, which is in Detroit, and was the main thoroughfare in a historic African-American neighborhood called Black Bottom. And so the image on the left was pre-1950s, and then the image on the right is post-1950s. And as you can see, the federal highway system completely removed that community. Next slide, please. So in regard to food access, zoning also impacts marginalized communities' access to healthy foods. For example, large grocery stores do not open their businesses in marginalized communities because they seek out areas close to high-paying clientele. Therefore, many of these communities only have fast food establishments, dollar stores, and convenience stores, which sell highly processed foods. This has caused a huge spike in diet-related illnesses, especially in communities of color. And I believe the graph on this slide really helps visualize that. This is a chronic disease death rates by race and ethnicity. And as you can see, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer are the highest in Black and African Americans. Next slide. So In an attempt to change historically harmful zoning, many U.S. cities are updating zoning codes to minimize limitations on agricultural uses to increase residents' access to healthy food. Allowing residents to grow their own food or encouraging small growers to produce food in food insecure areas can increase access to healthy food. By ensuring that food production is properly regulated and managed, local governments can create a mixed-use land pattern that incentivizes healthy food production in all zones while ensuring community concerns and quality of life issues are addressed. Here are some tools to remove zoning barriers. Provide clarity on agricultural terms, specify which zones allow agriculture, allow on-site sale of produce whenever possible, allow for small animal husbandry, amongst many others. Next slide, please. Great. Provide clarity on agricultural terms. Without clear definitions, zoning codes may discourage food production through ambiguous language and unclear regulations. Potential growers may have a difficult time discerning what is allowed and refrain from producing food due to a fear of a possible violation or fine. So in Austin, Texas, what they have done is updated their ordinance to define various agricultural uses, including aquaponics, horticulture, and indoor crop rotation. And the image is of the North Austin Community Garden. Next slide, please. Specify which zones allow agriculture. If land use is not spelled out, growers may be hesitant to invest long-term or even start growing, as they may feel they can be ordered to stop growing at any time. And this has happened. I'm sure many of you have heard about that, not necessarily in Vermont, but in some variety of different areas throughout the United States. Naming the urban agriculture as a permitted land use gives more permanence and authority to growers. For example, in Detroit, Michigan, Detroit's ordinance includes agriculture terms and where agriculture is permitted. And that is an image of the Michigan Urban Farming Initiative. Next slide. Allow on-site sale of produce. Some zoning codes may not allow on-site sale of produce, which limits the ability for growers to sell produce with their neighbors and other consumers. Specifically, permitting on-site sale of farm products can increase access to healthy food to neighborhood consumers. So here's an example from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Their municipal code specifies which products are allowed to be sold at a farm stand. Next slide. Allow for small animal husbandry. Restrictions on keeping animals can limit residents from producing additional food besides fruits and vegetables. Products like milk, eggs, and honey may be hard for consumers to find locally, especially in areas without access to fresh and affordable food. I do want to note here that prohibiting animal keeping can also disproportionately affect immigrant communities. One example is in Detroit. A Muslim community expressed a desire to produce halal meats. However, due to zoning codes, it is not permitted. But here is a positive from Boston, Massachusetts. Their zoning code sets provisions for keeping hens, bees, and it must include certain regulations, size, and animal limitations. Next slide, please. So let's talk about Vermont. So in Vermont, the state has given authority to municipalities to develop zoning bylaws, which they can elect to implement or not. Planning in Vermont. So there are 11 planning regions. Each region has a regional planning commission with a board of directors. Each region has a regional plan. Municipal plans are optional, but having an approved plan allows municipalities to participate in certain state and federal programs and access to funding sources. Municipal plans feed into regional plans, which help feed into state agency plans on topics as diverse as water quality, housing, and hazard mitigation. In Vermont, there are 213 municipal plans. In fact, 84% of municipalities have a plan. Next slide, please. So here's some case studies. There is a fantastic resource that was developed by Farm to Plate around local planning. And so these case studies are from that resource. So the first is from Washington County. Hunger Free Vermont's Council of Washington County, in partnership with the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, developed a mapping tool to identify food access barriers for community members. The goal was to identify potential opportunities to increase food access. Calais. They developed a self-sufficiency plan to increase, quote, an interest in growing and processing our own food to move towards food independence, end quote. And St. Albans in 2017 had in their city plan, they refer to health food access throughout their city plan. Next slide, please. So for more information about updating or amending zoning codes, please visit the Healthy Food Policy Project, or as we call it, HFPP. HFPP is a partnership between the Center for Agriculture and Food Systems at Vermont Law School, Rudd Center at the University of Connecticut, and Public Health Law Center. HFPP identifies and elevates local laws that seek to promote access to healthy food while also contributing to strong local economies, an improved environment, and health equity, with a focus on socially disadvantaged and marginalized groups. A lot of the information that I presented to you today is actually from the resource that, here's a screenshot of it on the slide. And I want to do a special shout out to the author. Her name is Tess Romanowski. She is a master's student at Vermont Law School, and she developed this resource for HFPP. Next slide. And here are some additional resources. I want to point out specifically the first two resources in the first column. Like I mentioned, the Healthy Food Policy Project and the Farm to Plate resource on local planning. These two resources have a variety of information around local planning and examples of innovative local policies. I think especially now during the pandemic, it's really important to support our local food systems and supply chains in the midst of what's happening right now. I believe you should be able to click the blue font, and that will take you to the page if any participants are interested in doing that. And then the next slide. I hope that in this presentation, I provided comprehensive information about municipal authority with a specific focus on zoning and planning, shared national and local examples to encourage methods of implementing similar plans in your community if you haven't done so already, and looked at another way to strengthen our local food system through law and policy. So I will open it up to questions.
Hi, I am trying to unmute Anna so she can ask you some questions.
I'm here. Yeah, I just accepted the request. Great. So one question that I have for you is, you talked about, I think it was Washington County, developing a mapping tool to identify food access barriers. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what specifically were they mapping?
So I can also share the resource, and it may be on Hunger Free Vermont's website, so I highly recommend going there if anyone is interested. Essentially, what they had realized in Washington County that a lot of community members were food insecure, and so they really wanted to figure out, okay, so what are the gaps? Why can't consumers connect to healthy foods? And so that tool was really just looking at those gaps and bringing them together to notify, you know, the Municipal Planning Commission that, hey, this is kind of the situation we have, and these are the gaps that we have, in the hopes that they could increase food access either through community work or through a legislative process. I hope that answered your question.
And do you know, just a follow-up question, do you know what or what kind of data they were collecting? Like, was it like a survey that they were gathering information? Were they tracking how many miles families are traveling to get food?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't know what type of data that they collected. However, I can send that information to the group. And also, if you go to the resources page on the PowerPoint, The local planning guide that Farm to Plate put together, they actually feature Washington County in this initiative in their case studies.
Great, thank you. Webinar. All right, so we do have a few other questions. Can you speak about land access agreements concerning easements for hunting and gathering, and specifically how a landowner can attach such an easement to their land?
I actually don't have any real expertise knowledge on land use agreements. I do know we had put together, or in the process of putting together, a resource for the Healthy Food Policy Project, looking at hunting, foraging, and fishing in the state of Vermont. We actually met with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to get an understanding of, you know, how exactly that it looks in Vermont and how we can increase access for food security purposes. But I can't talk to, I really can't, I don't feel comfortable providing any kind of information on that. I'm not really an expert there.
But it's good to know that other people are looking into this and seeing how they can make this a reality and adopt some best practices. Okay, question is, can you talk about how towns and regions can ensure land or food sovereignty? And question was from Kat. She's thinking about a town in Maine.
Yeah, so I know what you're talking about. I forget the name. I think it's Unity in Maine. And they put together a really comprehensive plan on food sovereignty that really came from the ground up. And I can share the link with all of you so you can see some of the language. But essentially, food sovereignty is an international movement that is still relatively new to the United States. And so you have a few folks or communities in New England who are trying to implement this at the local level. Anna, can you repeat your question again? That was just my intro to it.
Yeah, sure. It's talk about how towns and regions can ensure land and or food sovereignty. Yeah,
and so that's complicated. The town in Maine, you know, had a ton of support from the community, but when it came to actually passing some legislation around it, there is a lot of pushback. One thing that they ran into, one kind of barrier, was around slaughtering, because a lot of people wanted to be able to raise and slaughter on their own property. And so there are a lot of barriers. I'm not aware of any perfect model out there. So I definitely would do some research into what's going on in Maine. If anyone is interested in putting food sovereignty, you know, plan together, I know that Berry City has a food sovereignty resolution that is really, really exciting to see. I know there's some other local communities in the state of Vermont that have passed similar resolutions, but in regards to having something with teeth, Maine has that food sovereignty, you know, legislation, but it's getting a lot of pushback. And so I think it's important to kind of read up on that and see what are the barriers. So if you are interested in really giving teeth to a resolution in your community, you can see what barriers you may run into.
Great, and that's what I was thinking about as well. And a lot of the things that you were talking about is actions that would need to be enacted by municipalities and not necessarily as citizens, but we do have the ability to put forward resolutions on the town agendas. So I think that would be really great to look at how Barry has been moving that forward.
Agreed, yeah.
And a question from the audience, can you explain what food sovereignty is?
Yeah, so I mean, there are like so many different definitions that are out there. And I think, you know, even if you do like a quick Google search, you're gonna have at least 50 different definitions pop up. But essentially, I think it's important to realize food sovereignty is a term that was coined by the members of Via Campesina, and this was in the 1990s. And it essentially asserts that people who produce, distribute, and consume food should control the mechanisms and policies of food production and distribution.
Great, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
And one more question from Kat. Can you talk, a few more questions. All right, so let's see. There's one from Benjamin, so I'll let him go first. What's your take on the potential for technology in helping to address food deserts, with hydroponics and aeroponics becoming big business near some suburban areas? I'm curious if it's getting more affordable to leverage those ideas to help more food grow where it isn't currently. So using those technologies to address food deserts.
Yeah, so in the resource that I talked about, that the Healthy Food Policy Project around zoning ordinances, we had a methodology that we used to identify the most innovative ordinances that have been passed. And I'm not aware of anything that focused on specifically technologies. And so it's really hard to say how it's helping with food security, because it's relatively new. And looking at food deserts, it seems as though there needs to be more research and more data compiled to really see how it's able to help with food security. This is a generalization, but a lot of these technologies tend to be housed in more like hip places, in more gentrified neighborhoods. Though we do see in places like New Orleans, Louisiana, they are trying to advance these technologies in marginalized communities. But we don't really know how much it's really advancing food security at this point. It'd be a great project though, Ben, if you're interested.
And since we're on the topic, would you mind defining food deserts for people? In my head, I'm thinking about places where just like food isn't available, but I'm also thinking in a lot of the areas that we live by a lot of farms. So maybe it's not necessarily that food isn't produced near where we live. More we can do food deserts.
Sorry, you cut out just a little bit there, but just what is it, essentially defining what a food desert is?
Yes, if you can define food deserts.
Okay, great. So I do want to point out that the term food desert, which is recognized by the USDA and by many of us, is actually something that a lot of community organizers, especially people of color, want to redefine as food apartheid. And so I'd like to give you that definition first. And essentially food apartheid is a form of apartheid because in most cases it's the lack of availability of healthy food, which disproportionately affects communities of color. So it's essentially whole communities are geographically and economically isolated from healthy food options. So I just want to throw that out there to the group. Karen Washington, who I don't know if you can see the poster behind me, but she, when I was a student for Vermont Law School, she came up and talked about a lot of the food justice that she's been doing. And she was the first one to kind of introduce that to all of us. But essentially going back, defining food desert is essentially an area, urban or rural, where it's really difficult to be able to afford nutritional food at all times.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow up on another question. Can you talk about some laws that need to be done for of land and water?
Sorry, sorry, I don't know if it's my connection, your connection, but some food law.
To be undone for actual sovereignty of land and water.
Food law to be undone to support food sovereignty.
Not necessarily food laws. The examples here are water and septic.
Okay, so if I understand the question, essentially changing regulations around water and septic to improve access to food, essentially?
Yes, not necessarily limited to water and septic, but just generally what are some laws that can be undone?
You know, that's a hard one because public health is the primary focus for any municipality. And so when you look at zoning and the different uses, you're not going to loosen any kind of zoning codes that will let schools be built next to a factory, for example, or in regards to agriculture, having agriculture near factories. So I think it's important to realize there's not an actual perfect system for how to do this. It's also very hard to change the law. Updating and amending it is possible, but you know, and also passing new zoning ordinances can help. But with current laws, I mean, it's pretty difficult to change because, again, the primary concern for municipalities is public health. And if there's, you know, when it comes to animal husbandry, for example, there's a lot of pushback in a lot of communities because of nuisance, as well as concerns of waste and it, you know, running off into other people's properties and into the water system. So yeah, I'm not aware. I'm sure it exists, but from the research we've done, I can't say that we've come across any laws that were going to impact public health in any way.
All right, thank you, Whitney. That's all the questions that I had from the audience.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for doing that and for all of the questions. It was super helpful. I am working to transition all of us to, hi, I'm a floating head. I am working to transition all of us into breakout rooms for the participant-led and more interactive portion of the evening. And so we're going to have 2 different breakout rooms today as opposed to the 5 we tried last time. And so hopefully that'll go a bit more smoothly. And we will have facilitators in both rooms. Chris Wood, you'll be in room 2. Please press record when you get into the room. And then Kat will be in room 1. And Kat and Chris, if you have any issues in the room, please call me because you might not be able to message me. And so with that, excuse me. When we go into the breakout rooms, what we're going to be doing is kind of introducing ourselves and sharing your name, where you are from, and maybe 1 or 2 things that you learned or have a question about from today. You might not get your questions answered, but we will definitely listen to what really intrigued you and what is making you think a little bit differently after the 2 different presentations. And so we'll do that till about 5:55, and then we will hop back into to wrap up. I did notice we just lost a lot of participants, so maybe we won't last the whole time till 5:55, but Kat and Chris, if you guys just want to keep me updated on what's going on in your rooms, that would be great. And with that, we will give this a shot.
Kat Buxton, and I currently live in Thetford, Vermont.
Oh, nothing.
I run the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition. I wear a lot of different hats, and I like to play with soil and bugs and plants every chance I get, and ideally kids too. And I miss my kids because they're not in school, right? You know, I don't have kids of my own. And I'm really intrigued at how this presentation got threaded together, from everything Nathan brought to us and what was like, two things that we're talking about, and food sovereignty is kind of what I'm seeing as a common thread. And so that's one takeaway, is that food and land is something I need to rethink in terms of, you know, in this legal, maybe we'll go back to normal world, which I
don't think she heard you.
Anna, would you like to go next?
Yeah, and I just want to say that I'm having some technical difficulties on my side. So if I go silent, that's probably because I didn't hear you. But I did press the record button. I got permission from Lauren. So we are all now on the record. So I'm Anna Mahi. I'm the Climate Projects Coordinator at Vital Communities. And I'm fairly new to the Upper Valley. I got here in summer of 2018. And I came here doing an AmeriCorps internship with the National Park in Woodstock. And I was really interested to hear about two things, mostly from Chief Perro, was the change in species compositions that we're going to be seeing as the climate gets warmer. That's definitely something that was on my radar working at the Park Service doing an internship there. We also definitely have seen a lot of loss of the butternut species. And the second thing was learning about that, the mapping of food or barriers to food access, because during my time being an intern, I lived in Woodstock, and I had noticed that I think it's a general trend. A lot of people tend to go shop for food in either White River Junction or mostly in Lebanon, the big grocery stores there. And maybe not, but maybe for the people who are a little bit more strapped for cash. And I will admit, as an AmeriCorps intern, that was definitely me. And being able to have conversations about that. How do we make access to good food? How do we increase access to good food? Should I call on somebody else?
No, I've got a list. So that so Michael, could you go next?
Sure.
Thank you, Anna.
Michael Saka. I live in Tunbridge. I also happen to be president of the board of the Alliance for Vermont Communities, which is focused on Stratford, Tunbridge, Sharon, and Royalton as, you know, communities working together for communities. I also, my wife and I have a goodly sized garden, about 3,000 square feet, and we put a lot in the root cellar, a lot in the freezer, and we're enjoying those benefits, especially now. You know, it was great to hear from the two speakers today. They might not be, well, it was great to hear those two different perspectives, two different ways to approach land use and respect, maybe. Anyway, looking forward to more on this, especially building soils, building healthy soils. That's really what it's about for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Bill, would you like to go?
Sure. It was great to hear from you, Nathan. I'm sorry you probably didn't hear us laughing as you kept putting your little jokes into your presentation because we're all muted, but you're a good talker. Mm-hmm. A lot of good information. I live in Thetford, in the village of Post Mills, and I'm interested in how to make our food sources local. I think we have an opportunity now with this pandemic that systems have collapsed in lots of ways, and we get a chance to put things back together the way that we think that makes sense for long-term sustainability. So it's a great opening we have. That's a silver lining in this tough time.
Thank you, Bill. Bob.
Let's see, I'll turn my mic up so you can hear me. I'm Bob Farnham. A lot of people know me as Bob the Green Guy because I support renewable energy, energy efficiency, transportation, and food issues. I'm using the technology that we have at hand to help myself get my own messages out, but also to support others in really amplifying the work that's happening. And that's why I'm just so psyched about what Kat's up to and what Vital Communities has been doing all along. And now with the pandemic, it really is, in a sense, forcing us all to, at least for the time being, to learn this technology and use it to get the word out. So the ability for us to be able to click a little button that says, hey, share this really cool information with my 4,000 or 5,000 friends is something that we as individuals that didn't own the printing press to be able to reach a lot of people with no carbon footprint, virtually no carbon footprint. And I'm excited about the technological aspect of it, but at the same time, what I'm finding is that it's bringing new people in, and will likely bring those people to in real life events when we're able to get back out there and meet face to face. But in the meantime, we can continue our really important work and not literally infect others with the issues related to the pandemic. So big hats off to Vital Communities and Kat for doing this. It's just fantastic. And Chief Pirro, my deepest respect.
Thank you, Bob. Garrett, we'd love to hear from you. Garrett, can you hear? We can't hear you. All right, no word from Garrett. Looks like your mic is on. I'm going to ask Carolyn to go.
Oh, there's Garrett.
Oh, did we get you, Garrett?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, how about you, Carolyn? Carolyn Gregory, are you there? It's so hard to know when you can't see a face. Okay, I'm going to skip Garrett and Carolyn, and please let us know if we can help you. Hear you, just send us a note in the chat if you know how to do that. And then next would be Phyllis Fox. And Phyllis, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. There you are.
Hi, can you hear me? Kat?
Yeah.
Who's sitting next to me?
Hey, Jason.
We're listening. I mean, I just listened to the chief talk. I was sitting next to him at one of those talks in White River Junction one time. And there's a couple of things that we've tapped into, and you guys are doing an amazing job. Thank you so much. We were up in the woods today for about 2.5 hours, and we're just looking for the opportunities to make things better for the future and to get through this as best we can. So thank you so much.
All right. I want to continue the invitation to Carolyn or Garrett to interrupt at a point that you're able. We can get you. We'd love to hear from you. But with the absence of that, I'm going to start a new round because everything that you all just said made me think of some more things, and I hope that we can get through a round of thoughts. Hi, Lauren. 5 minutes.
It was brought up in the other room that maybe at some point I want to all come back into one group. So I just wanted to throw that idea out.
We could. How many folks are in your room?
There are 6 in the other room, so they're a smaller group. So once you guys,
you know what, we
kind of get to a good stopping point.
This is a good time, right?
Work. We just went through once, and I think it would be nice if we could all go through as a group.
I will, I'll close your room and then I'll go talk to the other room and we'll get all back together.
Okay.
I didn't raise my hand or anything. Oh, good.
One of the things I'd like to bring up to everybody, the lady that was just on said she was up in the woods and looked at different things. Everything here for us that we'll ever possibly could need, and it's up to us to find it. From the medicine to the food, and this word foraging, that word ought to be thrown right out the window and
the potential to be really important to us, and that it's gone. And it, you know, in a way it made me a little melancholy, because it's like how many other structures out there, how many, you know, natural resources have been just completely removed from history, except for what's been passed down through oral histories, or even, you know, photography. I mean, it's not news, right? We all know it. I mean, I think we all can think of at least 3 to 5 different natural resources that have been kind of wiped off the planet. But, you know, that just really, really stuck with me, you know, especially since it's so close to home. And if I may, I would love to respond to you, Grace, actually, because I think that having it at the grassroots level is really, really important. And I think community engagement and an agreement is crucial. I mean, it's absolutely crucial. And the only reason I really, you know, suggest going to your municipal leaders is there are barriers in place that can prevent people from being reaching food sovereignty. And so leaving folks out of the conversation who may be able to remove those barriers, you know, it's important for them to be in the room. But yeah, I mean, I also agree that it's really important for community members to really do this together. Thanks.
Thanks, Whitney. Okay, Toad, you are on.
All right, everybody. So Mike, you haven't undone the video. None of us have video.
If you go to the bottom of your screen, on the left-hand side, there's a video icon.
All right, so that's not true. The icon is at the top of the screen, but it tells me that I have not been, it has been disabled by the host.
Oh, that might be.
So whoever unmuted my mute can unmute my video also.
I will go do that, Toad.
Anyway, you don't have to see me. My name's Toad Buxton, and this was all very fascinating. The main thing I got from this is humans need to slow down and step back from nature. Let nature do its thing. You know, the gentleman talked about the plants that we think of as weeds or invasives. Nature's been doing this a long time. There's here we go. There is a lot that the evolutionary experiment that's been going on for 3 billion plus years knows more than humans will ever know. And the best thing we can do, I believe, is let nature back in. And if you look out your window right now, the results of humans not being in nature and not forcing their will on nature, whether good intentions or bad, our absence has created a cleaner environment. The airs are cleaner, you know, and that's all I'd have to say. And this is a great talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toad. Okay, Lauren, you seem to be in this group, or at least you're next on my line. You wanna give us something?
Hi, I am. I have 2 computers and a phone going, so I'm going back and forth on different screens. So I haven't heard all of the conversation, unfortunately. But I just wanted to, so I'm Lauren Weston, for those of you who don't know me. Thanks, Chris. I live in Burlington, not the Upper Valley, but all the people that I like live in the Upper Valley, so that's always great. I think I just want to give like huge kudos to our speakers from today. Pulling together these presentations has been incredible. I had never met Chief Perro before, and I cold emailed him, and he responded and met up with me and just shared so much of his knowledge and how he sees the world with a total stranger. And we met at a library, and it was wonderful. Go libraries. This was before the pandemic, my apologies. And then Whitney, I actually met at the farm show, the Vermont Farm Show in Essex. And that's how she's on one of our presenters today. I met her and she was amazing and super knowledgeable. And so I think in general, I think what I learned from this process is just to go find out what you want to know and go meet people. And I'm so pleased with how this has all turned out. I'm just really grateful for how this has all turned out. It could have gone really poorly, especially with the transition. It definitely could have gone poorly. And I guess all of what Whitney was talking about made me think about really just wanting to know my community better and know what are the limitations and the scope of what I can do in this community. And yeah, just to keep connecting with people. It's so great. Everybody just wants to hang out in Vermont. So nice. And thanks. I might hop off and go back into the other room, but thanks.
We should all go back in the other room. There's only 6 of us here.
There's only 9 in the other room.
So we could be one room.
Yeah, we thought we might transition back into one big room once you guys finish the go around. So Chris, if you'll just let me know when that is, I will, I'll do that. We'll do that dance.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. Jen, you are up.
Jen, you're muted.
Hey, now you should be able to hear me. So I'm Jen. I'm in White River in Wilder, and yeah, I loved both the presentations. It was great hearing from Chief Perro, and it was just neat to hear about the tribe, and so I definitely liked hearing about how the women were able to kind of be in charge of the tribal aspects. It's nice to hear about that. And I guess similar to what Laura just said about getting to know my community, I'm doing a compost service in my community. I just started I guess almost a year ago, and working with the community garden, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Willing Hands that does food, getting access to food around that community. So I'm working with them about getting composting programs. And I guess, yeah, just growing more food and, seeing what we can do in our community. So I'm looking forward to community gardening, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do it soon. That's it. I guess you guys are all muted now.
I'm going to send us thanks, Jen. I'm
Yeah.
gonna send a signal to Lauren.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
That's great, Toad.
That's great. That's great.
That's awesome.
I'm going to send a message to Lauren and get us probably back into the big group. Thanks all.
Chief Perro,
Yeah.
unfortunately, no one got to hear what you just said.
Oh.
And it was incredibly important. You were
Yeah.
talking about foraging. So, Lauren, are we at a point where Chief Perro can share with us
Yes.
thoughts on foraging?
Yes, please.
Would you mind doing that again, Chief?
Yeah, okay, take that word you said, foraging, and go put it in the dirt and contaminate it if you wish. Foraging's a bad word. Yeah, if you're out gathering or harvesting, you're out there taking, say, a fiddlehead. There's 7 of them all coming up to it one time. You take 3, and then go to the next section. Take 3 more, and then take 3 more. Leave more than you take, and then the following week you can come back and harvest some more. Take just enough that you need to use, and take no more. If you're gonna throw it away into compost, why'd you pick it to start with? Oh,
Thank you. I think that's really important. Okay, how many are we now? I'm trying to see everybody. Lauren, do you have a handle on who's here? Because I'd love to go around, but I'm not sure I could keep a list very well.
I can definitely do that.
Will you call on us?
Yes.
Okay. Bob Farnham is raising his hand, I see.
Bob, can you unmute yourself? No, you cannot. Okay, there we go.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a heads up that some of the people that came back into the room are still in muted mode, and you can't unmute yourself in that mode. So I had a feeling that folks wanted to say something but weren't able to unmute themselves to say something. On the other hand, there are some people that are, anyway, so check and see if there's a way that you can unmute everybody. And then if they choose to mute themselves, they should be able to unmute themselves after that. It's just a technical thing. Sorry, I'm just trying to.
I think I just did that.
Okay.
As you were saying.
Between the two of you, I figured you'd figure it out, but.
Well, with your help, thanks.
If you do have a problem unmuting, please type in the chat and we will we'll work on that. Sorry, I'm popping up twice also. So we'll do one more go around if people are still up for it. We've got some time left, and then if we're done early, we're done early. But so I will just call on people if we can just do name and town and another comment. If you want to share the one you shared in your previous room, that'd be great. If you want to share something else, that would also be great. If you want to log off, that's great too. So I'll start, and then I'll send it over to Toad. So my name is Lauren Weston, and Kat and Chris and I and many, many others have been working really hard to get these together. And I just wanted to say thank you for everybody for hopping on and for staying in. I also want to say thank you to the knowledge that was in the room who weren't presenters. I learned a lot on that chat with the questions that people had.
Toad's on the screen.
So I think that was just really great and enjoyable. And so I just want to say thank you all for doing that. And I learned a lot, and I will definitely be going back through the recording because I was doing a little bit of technology on my side without listening well. But so those will be posted soon. And now I'll ship it over to Toad if you want to go next.
If he has headphones he could plug in, maybe that would solve his problem.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Toad Buxton. How you doing? I'm from Sharon, Vermont, and I am Kat's husband. As exciting as that is. And I'd like to show you all this nice picture I drew. Huh? There you go.
Nice.
All right. That's all I got to say. I love you people. Thanks for the talk.
Next on my screen is Bill Keegan.
Who's is doing that? Do you know, Lauren? Okay.
Bill, can we hear you now?
There, now we got it. We got it
Sorry.
coordinated. No, thank you. I'll repeat what I said in the smaller room, which is there's a silver lining to the pandemic here, that systems are falling apart and we get to put the things back together in a more sustainable way. And locally produced food is one of those chains that we can establish.
So,
Not cruise lines, not airlines. What?
Bob, would you like to go next?
As I said in the other room, I'm just so excited that this technology lets us continue this important work, while at the same time giving us connections to people that we might not have been able to connect with before, and an opportunity to connect in real life after the pandemic is done and we're able to come back together. So, as you know, I'm a big advocate for this, using this technology to bring people together, both virtually, but even more importantly, literally. So the work that Lauren has put in, and Kat and the rest of the team at Vital Communities, is just remarkable. And I just couldn't be more proud to be throwing in ideas and trying to help nurture the work that you're doing. So that's all. Just keep going. Don't stop.
Thanks, Bob. Jen Murphy, I think you should be able to unmute yourself, but if not.
Hi, I'm Jen Murphy. I'm in White River Junction. And yeah, I guess I'm just excited to get going with some community gardening projects in White River. And I was saying in the other room, I'm doing some composting. I've been working with Kat also. So just kind of getting to figure out all the things we can do in our community, and then yeah, just getting started with that. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you. Grace, are you able to? I think I gotta unmute you.
Okay. I just didn't want to contribute to any background noise. So just to reiterate my appreciation for the chief's commentaries, particularly the information about how late the eugenics movement was. The eugenics, I wouldn't call it a movement. I would call it a, I don't know what I would call it, but it was a shock to me to hear that it was as late as the 1980s. Whoops. Is that, can you all hear that in the background?
That's okay though. Keep going.
Okay. I have somebody else vacuuming, so I'm quite happy about that. And it was, and also about women being in charge of the village. That was a great piece of information as well. And by the way, where I live would have been underwater, I believe, during the Great Inland Sea episode that he talked about. So I'm just as glad that it isn't here anymore, but it did leave some really bodaciously fertile soil where I live. So I'm really grateful. And the topic of food sovereignty is a very important one. The problem of African American people not having access to appropriate food is definitely a form of food apartheid, as many of our friends in that movement teach us. And I think that certainly what my goal is for my life at this point is to really make it possible for more people who have not been given access to land to have access to land, to advance the opportunity for people who are refugees, whether they're climate refugees or war refugees or any kind of refugees, to be able to find safety. And in this time, finding safety is the main thing that we have to think about, and feeding ourselves as locally as possible is crucial to that. So thanks.
Thanks, Grace. I'm going to go to Jesse next. Jesse, are you able to unmute yourself? I'm going to try to unmute you.
Well, I'll apologize for having disabled my camera because I don't know how to fix that. I'm just feeling far away and sort of without community. I moved to Keene late last year and had been just trying to be helpful in the town, so I moved there. But, you know, I'm going to have to plant my own spring. Would have liked to hear more of your program. Thanks.
Thanks, Jesse. Everything will be posted online and I'll add the link to the chat too, so everybody can have that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. Phyllis, can we hear from you?
Do I have to unmute myself, or did you unmute me?
I unmuted you and it worked.
Okay, so here we are. Well, I did say something before, and I just say I'm just so grateful for all the people, all the stuff that Chris Wood does and has been doing for years. And it's just a time when we just have to figure out, you know, how we can make the best of what's happening and how we can make it the best when it's over. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. I'll turn over to Michael Saka. Are you able to?
Really appreciate this series. I'll just echo that from others, and particularly today's speakers. Very good. I would also like to mention Bill's point about not going back to what we had and an opportunity to really do some different things around, especially around food production and distribution, that kind of thing. But generally, let's seize the moment in many ways. And anyway, I'd love to see that in future discussions. And I'm looking forward to more, especially regarding really boosting the soil productivity. Thanks.
We'll go to Anna.
Thank you, Lauren. So I'm with Vital Communities. I'm their climate projects coordinator, and I live in Heartland. I previously lived in Woodstock, and I was part of a community garden there, Sustainable Woodstock's community garden. That was really fun. That was my first time ever gardening. And I was really looking forward to, and still am looking forward to, participating in the community gardens in Heartland. But a lot of that has been on hold, obviously, because of the pandemic. And I'm really excited to be here with you all and learning about how, and just continuing these conversations about food sovereignty and food access.
Great, thanks. Whitney.
Hi, so Whitney, yeah, I really enjoyed all of this. You know, it's really nice to be with all of you, even though we're not in the same room together, unfortunately, but it's really nice to be here with you talking about these important topics. I'm in Montpelier. I've lived in Vermont for 4 years, and I've lived in 3 different towns. So this is my current home in Montpelier. So yeah, and Chief Pero, I want to just quickly talk about foraging. Like I said during my presentation, we're developing a paper on hunting fishing and foraging, and the different state and federal laws and policies.
I want to use that word.
What's that?
Continue.
Okay. Thanks, Phyllis. Yeah, it's a really interesting document. And foraging is something that's not highly regulated except in national parks. But the fear is that people, like you said, are taking all the fiddleheads and not, you know, leaving some, A, for others, and B, just so they can produce again in the future. So it's just, it's really interesting. And I'd love to share that with the group once it's published, which should happen next month.
Awesome. And then let's go to Chris.
Chris Wood.
Oh, let me. This is my fault. I apologize.
There we go. Okay. And so I'm Chris Wood, but as an organizer, I'm handing it over to my wife, Sylvie, to get to speak because I probably can't speak too much.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for all the organizers who have put this together. It's really wonderful. And and Whitney, I'm really interested in your work. I think it's so fascinating that somebody's really like at that level, looking at, you know, all this, you know, on a national level and local level and regional level and all that. And you know, I'm a native Vermonter, and I grew up, you know, picking wild blackberries and growing food, you know, since I was a little tot. And today I went for a bike ride, my first bike ride in the very muddy roads. And I just did this, you know, 10-mile bike ride around my loop and on the dirt roads. And I must have seen at least 6 different people out in their gardens today, hoeing away. And I want to just acknowledge the tradition that we have in this state of, you know, when you drive around in the summer, you know, I don't know what the percentages of people who are actually, and it may be like tiny little gardens that they're growing, and they may not be putting food up or growing food that's going to last through the winter or anything like that. But there is a strong culture of gardening here, just garden, you know, backyard gardening that I want to really acknowledge. And I just want to think about ways that we can bring that in, like culturally more into our awareness. And I think what I'm thinking about right now, being sequestered for 3 weeks and, you know, being in my neighborhood more, is that there are plenty of neighbors that on my hill that I don't really know very well. And so one of my commitments now is just to, like, as I ride my bike, is to stop by and say hi and ask them what they're planting or whatever. And just to, like, to start to integrate more, you know, in a very local, super local way of who's here and who is doing what. And it seems like spring is a really good time to be, you know, putting on those, you know, staying really alert and aware to, you know, all the people who are out there working the land or harvesting or whatever. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Chris, do you want to say anything or?
I'm good.
Okay. Carolyn L's iPhone. Carolyn, are you also Carolyn Gregory?
I am.
Can you talk as Carolyn Gregory? No. Okay, so we'll do. Didn't seem to help either. Carolyn, can you hear me now? Can we hear you is really the question that I meant to ask.
Try.
Carolyn? No, I'm so sorry. I apologize, Carolyn. At this point, hello? Carolyn?
I'm here.
What is it? Can you turn your sound off on your other device? So whatever isn't your iPhone, can you mute that? Carolyn, how about if we would love to hear from you, but unfortunately the echo is wild. If you wanted to type something into the chat to everyone about who you are, any thoughts you have, that would be great. And then I will definitely read it. I'm sorry, the echo is just wild on our end. Let's go to Chief Pero.
Hi. One of the things I would like to bring up is our tribe has been doing a lot of work with the Dartmouth College, with the students, and we have been at the organic farm on Route 10, just north of Hanover Village. We have been there helping them grow things, show them our way of growing. And this last year we showed the way that we grow things, and they planted their exact same vegetables on another site, and we did twice the amount of food production. So, but the best thing that would come out of last year is that, I don't know if any of you have heard that 3 years ago, they found a clay urn that had squash seeds in it, 800 years old. And the University at Arizona was able to get some of those seeds and plant them. And then one of the students from there was able to come to Dartmouth to study. And she brought some of those seeds with her. And we planted those at the organic farm last year. This squash plant was so unique that on one runner, there was different types, different shapes of squash. And they each had a different flavor. And it's all on the same vine. And, you know, you'd think that they'd be all the same, but they were so different, and great meat. Oh, what a wonderful flavor. And that's from 800 years ago. So, yeah. Doing good.
Thank you.
And no more foraging. We gather.
I'm going to try Carolyn one more time because it looks like maybe everything's fixed. Carolyn, can we hear you?
According to my phone, it doesn't look like you can hear me.
We can.
You can?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Thank you for persevering. Chief Pero, thank you so much for all that you have shared with us today, and especially was happy to hear you bring up the whole subject of eugenics. I only learned about it maybe 10 years ago and was completely horrified, and realized that the University of Vermont was involved. But today you told me that one of the sites was Vergennes, and that's where I was growing up. And I left there way before 1988. So that's really pretty shocking, and I certainly am going to do more investigating. And I also, just to say that it's so important that we know about this, because I, for one, thought that was something that happened somewhere else and at a, long distant past. So Thank you for talking about that. And also, I want to thank you for talking about beavers. I think we've really done the world a huge disfavor to make them kind of a little enemy when they are so incredibly important to our ecosystem. So thank you for talking about that. And I found the whole program very inspiring, and I want to thank everyone that was involved in doing all this hard work. And thank you for taking time to let me talk. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks for figuring out the technology on your side. That was great. I think that we've hit everyone besides Kat.
Can I say again?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. If anybody would like me to have come later on this year when this nasty thing is come and gone and done its work, and if I'm still around, and if you want me to come and speak at your local group or something, give me a holler. I'd be glad to come, especially if there's a dinner involved.
That's awesome. And if you need, Nathan, would it be okay if I posted your email address on the website so people can know how to contact you?
Yes.
Okay, so I will do that at the same link that I just put in the chat. And he is great at responding to emails. That's how I initially met him. I just cold emailed him. So with that, I want to say thank you, and then I'll hand it over to Kat, who will do her go around and wrap us up. Kat.
All right. So wow, this was a great go around, and as was our little chat room that we had. And issues of food and land sovereignty are on my mind, and I'm so with you, Bill, that this is an opportunity for us to turn things around. We can't let it go back to normal. This is an opportunity to change how we treat each other, and that includes not just the humans. And I really think that is the most pivotal change that we can make right now, is to think about the way that we relate to our land and all of the systems around us. We have done a terrible job as our species generally, especially as Nathan pointed out, in the last 150 years. And I think we all know who's most responsible for that. So I am so glad you're all here. I'm glad to be in community with all of you. I want to let you know that I am going to be doing a webinar with 350 Vermont. Apparently, some of the 350 members joined our last webinar, and they really wanted more detailed, specific answers about, like, how do I grow this, and what do I do for this and my compost and soil health. And so 350 is going to host a free webinar, and we'll make sure to post that up on the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition website when it's all said and done, when we have that date, and I'll share it on social media, so that if folks want to come and ask specific questions, they're welcome to. I can say that generally when I'm trying to answer a question, I look to the greatest teacher around, and that's nature, to help me understand what is the best way to do. And I really appreciated getting to know Nathan. We had a nice long walk the other day, and he has incredible wisdom, and has been listening to our mother for a long time. I think we can all learn from that. I saw some things go into the chat, so Lauren, I'm going to leave it up to you. If those are things I need to talk about, just let me know. I did also want to say that I saw, Michael, thank you. You had been posting things, really good links in our chat. So we're going to save those as well and make sure that those are all available to everyone. So thank you for those resources, and let's continue to share all our resources. We all have a role to play in this community together.
Yeah, there is a question, one final question.
Okay.
For Chief Pirro, can you tell us how you double the produce in that garden at Dartmouth?
Okay, yeah. One of the practices that we use, we take branches and lay them all together in a long, nice row, and then put straw over top of the branches, and then put the dirt, the topsoil on top of the straw, and then plant into the soil. So it, I don't know the biochemics of it or how it all works, but they all join together. Don't use hay. Hay has a lot of seeds and you're going to be doing a lot of weeding. So, but the straw works out very, very well. So, that's it.
Great, thank you.
It works.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And now, Kat, the last few words, if you will.
All right. So, you know, with that, I'll say, let's all continue to keep learning from each other. We are going to have more events, and this is just one way that we can do that, but we all live in the same region. We all need to continue learning. I learned so much from you, Whitney. Thank you for your presentation. And I have a lot of questions percolating about how we can take some of that information forward to do the good work that we all know that we need to do. So thank you. It was a really nice combination to have you both coming from different perspectives about the same work. So our next event is on April 13th, right here on Zoom, except that one is going to be on Monday. It's April 13th, 5:30 in the evening till 8 p.m. You'll hear about it in all the same ways that you've been hearing about this series. There will be a Zoom link. We may have to change that link. I don't know what's happening. Apparently Zoom is kind of freaking out and there's some hacking stuff going on, but we all did good. So if we have to change things, we'll let you know, but the date and time will not change. And that topic is Here and Now, Human Impacts. And we have Fran and Asma, who I don't know much about other than what we have listed on our website. And I'm really looking forward to meeting them. Lauren has been doing all of the work to pull all of these incredible speakers together. So thank you all so much for participating in this second event, Climate and Community Resilience, Lessons from the Soil series. And we hope that you're beginning to see the thread of how the soil is the foundation for all of this and all of us. And so while we might not get into really specific things about microbes, which you know I love to do, this is really about a much bigger picture of how we treat each other so that we can learn to manage our land better. All of the information will be up on our website. All recordings will be up there. They'll all be accessible for free on our YouTube channel. Event 1 is already up there. If you have not seen it, you can check that out at any point. We may try and live stream future events, so stay tuned for that. We are updating our website, Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition, regularly as things change, so go up and check that if you need. And if you have any questions, you can get in touch with us. We are going to be encouraging people to register through the Hanover Co-op registration link. They're one of our partners. That's one way that we'll be able to possibly reduce hacking rather than post the Zoom link on Facebook for hackers to see. We're all learning here. So again, thank you all so much. Remember to thank all of our organizational sponsors and all of our financial sponsors when you see them, and don't forget to get your Chelsea Green book at 35% off. And I think that's about it. Did I catch it all, Lauren?
Thank you to our speakers today. It was great.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Whitney. I look forward to keeping you as friends as we move forward together.
See you guys next Monday.
Bye.